Hello, it is my honor to introduce the evening panel. You are in for a very special treat. Shh. Okay, I know, I can't believe it's the end of 3 extremely action-packed days. I look forward to hearing all of the ideas and collaborations and new possibilities that came out of all the different workshops and sessions and conversations that happened in the hallway. But first, we are in for a treat because we have a very esteemed panel to give us some thoughts as we end the 3 days of the Ashoka Exchange. But first, I'd like to extend a very special thank you to our sponsor for this evening gala and for the President's panel sponsor, Kirsten McElgunn from Western Union, who's the VP of Global Marketing. So she'll just say a few words and introduce the panel.
Thanks, Marina. On behalf of Western Union, we're proud to be a partner of Ashoka and a sponsor of this year's exchange. Having the opportunity to participate in sessions over the last couple of days, hear the stories, and meet so many of you who are changing the world, it's been both inspirational and transformational, and I hope it has been for you as well. Although I'm not technically a student, I feel as though I've received an education while I've been here about how the world is changing and the impact of social innovation. Education is one of the surest paths to financial inclusion, and financial inclusion drives economic growth, which is why education is the cause of choice for Western Union. Yes, many of you have been on the sending and receiving end of a Western Union money transfer, but it's the stories why the money was needed, some often funny, and what it did for the person who's receiving it that makes it so important. Western Union moves 28 transactions a second within 200 countries and territories and over 130 currencies. The money we transfer helps consumers pay school fees, helps businesses with their supply chains and cash management, and helps educational institutions collect and disperse funds for their international programs. With over 510,000 agent locations globally, Western Union is uniquely positioned to address the last-mile challenges of rural development that many of you are interested in. In 2012, we announced Education for Better, our 3-year commitment to help meet global education goals. This includes the development of shared valued products with over $10 million in investment to be used to solve challenges faced by educational institutions, governments, businesses, and NGOs, and will move funds to underserved communities with greater speed, accuracy, and allowing for greater accountability. Over the course of the commitment, we expect to move over $1 billion in principal to help education. In 2012, with the support of Western Union, I had the extreme honor of participating in the Ashoka Executive and Residence Exchange, working with Ashoka fellow Chetna Singha and the Mandeshi Foundation in rural India on their Chamber of Commerce program. The experience was life-changing for me, both personally and professionally, and it allowed me and my organization to gain a greater perspective into the customer needs. At Western Union, moving money for better is not just our tagline, it is our mission. With understanding your social missions, it allows us to extend and deepen customer relationships to better meet the evolving needs of changemakers like yourself. We are inspired to respond to your needs with commitment, passion, and innovation, aiming to enable your ideas and to connect you better with our collective global communities. And I'm hoping we may be able to attract some of these new scholars to our organization at the end of this. And with that, it gives me great pleasure to introduce your moderator for this evening's President's panel. You've already heard a bit about him last night. Brett Anders is a junior here at Brown University, where he created the school's first independent concentration in social innovation. Please join me in welcoming Brett.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that kind introduction and for helping us put on this panel. Can everyone hear me? No? Okay. Yes? There we go. Okay. So I'm just going to speak a little closer.
I said that. It's not so easy.
Okay. So here we go. Okay, so we're at this point where you've made it. It's a kind of bittersweet moment. We're almost at the end of the conference. Tomorrow you're all going to return home. Some of you will feel tremendously inspired. Some of you will have had a breakthrough insight. Some of you will have networked like champions. Maybe even some of you will have fallen in love. No? Okay. Maybe with an idea, with a person, Okay. So before we jump in, I want to do a quick poll just to get a sense of kind of where everyone is. Raise your hand if you're feeling really energized right now. Yeah? Okay. Great. Oh, wow. Even some of our panelists even feeling energized. Okay, raise your hand if you're feeling confused. Yeah, some people, okay. Raise your hand if you're feeling elated right now, really happy. Yeah? Okay. Yeah? Okay. Some people are raising 2 hands. Great. And what about exhausted? Raise your hand if you're feeling exhausted. Oh, wow. Okay. So that seems to be a common one. It's the end of the conference. Some people are feeling exhausted, so we're going to keep this quick. I've promised the Ashoka U team that the panel will finish by 9:15 p.m. Or was it 10:15? No, okay, I think it's actually 8:15. Okay. So we're going to finish. I have my phone here. We're going to keep track of time, and we'll be finished by 8:15 p.m. Also, I brought a bottle of Runa tea. This was a social venture. It's a social venture founded by 2 Brown grads and several Brown grads, and it's a energy drink. So if things get desperate up here, feel free to take a swig. Okay, great. So all weekend, people have been asking me what this panel is about. And I was kind of surprised that they didn't already know, since we intentionally picked a precise and informative title, University as a Local Global Agent of Change. But for those of you who still aren't sure, let me set the stage. This panel is about how institutions of higher education integrate social entrepreneurship into their model of education, how we got where we are today, and what's next. We have 3 very different schools represented. And the goal is that by looking at the view from the top across this diverse collection of schools, we can better understand what our priorities might be moving forward. Okay, so with that, let's dive in. For many students, social entrepreneurship represents an entirely new way of thinking about their education. This is what Ashoka U calls the new scholar. Students are embedding the values, goals, and techniques of social entrepreneurship across their entire education. So my first question is about College of the Atlantic, a small school in Bar Harbor, Maine, where every student majors in human ecology. Darron, you yourself attended College of the Atlantic, and it seems to have worked out pretty well because you went on to get a PhD in ethnobotany, work at the World Wildlife Fund for 10 years, and now you've returned to College of the Atlantic where you're president. The idea of experiential learning is at the heart of College of the Atlantic. And what I would like to know is how is COA's work in social entrepreneurship advancing the whole school's approach to education?
Great. How about me? There you go. I asked Brett to not call College of the Atlantic a tiny school, even though we only have 350 students. But it's a good question. The college was born in 1969, and it was born specifically in response to the social and ecological upheaval that was going on in that decade. So interestingly, but not surprisingly, it was embedded in the DNA of the organization from day one, this idea of social entrepreneurship. It is part of our DNA. We did not have to say, ooh, we really want to embed this idea into our curriculum. It is who we are. And I'm not saying that boastfully, but it's just, that's really what defines the College of the Atlantic. And interestingly, human ecology is the degree that everybody comes away with. And when I say human ecology, people tend to lock on the idea of ecology, and they imagine people studying snails or studying small creatures, and that's great to do. But really, what human ecology is all about is this idea of social entrepreneurship. So it's embedded in the organization because it's in the DNA of the organization. Now, recently, it has been really formalized at the College of the Atlantic through a program called the Hatchery that Jay Friedlander created. Jay is a faculty member at the College of the Atlantic. And the hatchery is an excellent idea incubator. It's not just about making businesses, it's about turning ideas into reality. And we provide the space, some startup capital, mentorship, and credit, and that's really important, and credit for doing social entrepreneurship work. And so the hatchery, ideally, I'd see every 350, that whole number of 350 students going through this process of the hatchery. But even if they don't participate in the hatchery, everyone at COA is required to do a capstone process, a capstone project. And that really, it forces the idea, and it really, again, exemplifies the idea that this idea of social entrepreneurship is baked in. It's baked into the DNA of the College of the Atlantic from day one, even though we're only 40 years old. And it's been an excellent fun time for me to come back to COA as president after being a student there some 20 years ago. And it's just a lot of fun. And the college itself, I think it's when we're all tired right now on a day like today, and at a time like this, it's important to not get overwhelmed and have fun. We need to make sure fun is an important element of everything we do. So, thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thanks, Darron. I think that's a great example of how we have kind of the institutional ideas that have been around for a while, embedded from the start, but also then how those get reinforced and transformed when we bring in something new. And so this theme of kind of old and new is something I want to return to a little bit later on.
Great.
So I now want to turn to Kerry Healey, president of Babson College. Babson is located less than an hour from here in Massachusetts. Actually, I think Google Maps told me it would be 44 minutes drive. And it has around 3,000 students. Kerry, you have an undergrad degree in government and a PhD in political science and law, not to mention a couple decades of experience across academia, government, and international diplomatic and humanitarian work. So I think you have a sense of how the different sectors fit together. Babson, from the beginning, has been about preparing students to excel in business and entrepreneurship. And my question is social entrepreneurship just one small area of that? Or is this field and interdiscipline somehow something that informs the entirety of Babson today?
Thank you very much. And welcome to you all. It's great to see everyone here. It seems like it has been an incredibly exciting couple days. I've had an opportunity to speak with all of the presidents who were in attendance today, and I know that we are all very excited to be members of this community. So thank you for having us here. Babson today has a fully integrated approach to teaching entrepreneurship, and social entrepreneurship is at the heart of that. It's right there in our mission statement that says that we are educating entrepreneurial leaders of all kinds, so to include social entrepreneurs, but to create social and economic value everywhere. So if it weren't enough to say that we're here to educate entrepreneurs of all kinds, it's reiterated in our mission statement that they're supposed to go out and create social and economic value everywhere, meaning worldwide. So I feel that today, Babson can feel very secure in the notion that everything we do is seen through that lens of values that were clearly articulated by our faculty in the last decade, which was to apply a lens of social, environmental, economic responsibility, and sustainability, which we call SEERS, to everything we do. So regardless of whether you're studying accounting or marketing or entrepreneurship or one of our other 10 divisions, you're looking at it through that lens of social responsibility, and I believe this lens that we called SEERS. So I think that it is indeed part of us today, that social entrepreneurship is part of what we do. It was not always the case. Babson is almost 100 years old. It started out as a men's business institute, And some of the pictures from those years that hang on our walls are really pretty amusing at this point. They were speaking into dictating machines, and they had secretaries in the next room typing things out, and they wore coats and ties to work every day and punched in and punched out with time machines to simulate a work environment. But today, what you'll see is very different. Sometime in the 1980s, President Sorensen convened the students to really think about what were their values and what did they want to have out of their education. And they said, yes, they wanted to learn how to be successful in business, but they also wanted to lead richer lives. And the question of how do you start becoming involved in social entrepreneurship, I believe, was begun in those early discussions around how do you begin richer lives, to begin to learn how to live richer lives. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Certainly from the Babson students that I know, I would say that we all have a lot to learn from Babson on entrepreneurship, and it's heartening to hear that Babson also has maybe learned something for the rest of the school from the concepts of social entrepreneurship. So that's a great exchange. Thank you. So I want to now turn to Nick Petford, Vice-Chancellor of the University of Northampton. This is a school of about 18,000 students located in Northampton in the UK. And Nick, I want to ask you about the evolution of your school, but maybe it's also mirrored in your own personal evolution. You studied geology, and you've conducted research all over the world, including with several universities in the US and at NASA. And your school has changed the way that it promotes entrepreneurship, shifting from a focus on technical knowledge to a belief in a sort of laissez-faire encouragement of creativity. So I'd like to know how entrepreneurship is being supported and resulting at your school.
Thanks. I think it's probably better to say what we didn't do as opposed to what we did. And two things we didn't do. Firstly was to locate social enterprise, social entrepreneurship exclusively in the business school. Because we felt that might alienate some staff, it might silo it, and that's not to say that it wouldn't work elsewhere, but for us we decided consciously not the business school route. I think the second thing we didn't do was to set up a centre for social enterprise or social entrepreneurship with loads of research, again, which is another trait that universities would do when they want to get into a new area. Instead, what we wanted to really do is drive all of this from the student experience perspective from grassroots level, and really kind of hold tight to the mantra of learning by doing as opposed to being taught at. Which is difficult. It's not an easy thing to do at university, and I don't think we've cracked it 100% yet. Please don't leave this room thinking we've got some panacea for this. But one key thing that's really worked for us is something which broadly we can call We Do Ideas, and there's a couple of members of staff at the university here, Ray Owen and Tim Curtis over there somewhere, instrumental in setting up, really right at the beginning of the first week the freshers arrive at university, a contest where there's real cash, money on the table, where they can pitch ideas, and if they're good and they're socially entrepreneurial, we will pay them money to get on and run a project. And it doesn't matter what they're studying, so they could be studying nursing or midwifery or chemical engineering or dance or drama, don't care less. Come to us with a great idea. If it's socially innovative, we'll bankroll it. And we've actually lost quite a lot of money to do it. But that's the key, because the learning by doing is that it's learning through failure. And that sounds an odd thing in universities, because all we ever, when you go to university, it's all about passing stuff, isn't it? Passing exams, getting credits, and all the rest of it. And that's not a particularly entrepreneurial behavior. Failing is perhaps not so good either for your career. So how do you create a safe space where students can learn, be entrepreneurial, study their curricula that they've chosen, nursing, midwifery, yeah, but at the same time win or lose in a competitive environment where we're helping to support them through finance. So that was our approach to the student experience. We've also looked at how we run the university and how we design our internal processes. And again, we've talked a lot here in the last couple of days about students and academic staff, but in universities there's a whole other load of really important people who run the professional services, and they've got a great claim on innovation as well. So where's their voice? And what we've done at Northampton is to take one of our really important services, a state service, and we spun it out as a social enterprise inside the university. So it really is a case of walking the talk for us.
Thanks, Nick. I think that's a great, I love how kind of multifaceted the support for social entrepreneurship is at your school. And I hope that you are starting to get a feel kind of how the perspectives from these different schools vary. When we were having dinner before coming over here, we were talking about, what are the differences, similarities between the schools. Certainly size is a nice difference. We couldn't really decide if it was a small, medium, and large school, or maybe it was like a bite-sized school and a medium school and, like a meal of a school. So but there are a lot of different, ways of looking at this. And there's some other differences that we're going to pull out as we go along too. So in the next question, I want to kind of go back to the idea of social entrepreneurship representing a new approach to higher education. I'm not sure that it's really new. I think the universities have been attempting to prepare students for lives of meaning and purpose for a long time. And so what I would like to know is, in what ways is social entrepreneurship really new and different? And in what ways is it simply a reimagining or a better realization of something that schools have been trying to do for a long time?
You want me to go first? Okay. I actually, we were talking earlier, again at dinner, about the kind of long intellectual history that entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship has in academia. And I really take the stance that it's more that the kind of goals, the process, and the context have radically changed, very, very different. When I think of the context, I mean, especially the past 20 years, things are changing so rapidly. I think about how governments have decentralized and power and decision-making has decentralized. I think about how we can, share information so much more widely and so much easier, how there's access to information now that makes today's world just so dramatically different from 20 years ago. And when I think of process, I think we've really moved away from imagining a silver bulleted approach to solving problems. I've worked a lot in tropical forest conservation, and there's been dozens of silver bullet approach, starting from protected areas to biosphere reserves, then medicinal plants were going to save the Amazon, and then non-timber forest products, and then carbon. And I think what we've taken away from that is no matter what the entrepreneurial activity, it's not going to be a silver bullet. We need to, and I think we've started to really revel in the complexity of these ideas that we're all grappling with. So the process has changed. And then the goals have also, I think, matured in an important way. I am cautious about using social entrepreneurship and thinking about social entrepreneurship in a way that is, here's a problem and we've got to fix it. A lot of these issues that we're grappling with are so incredibly complex that we're failing more than we're making much progress. And that's okay, provided that we continue to learn from it. So I don't think it's a new thing, but I do think that the context, the process, and the goals have really matured an awful lot. And we've learned a lot from 100 years of successes and failures.
Thanks, Darron. Nick, would you like to expand?
Yeah, I think there is an element of, without, in the nicest possible way, old wine in new bottles to some of this. Joseph Schumpeter published a paper in 1908 on social value. That's over 100 years ago. So the idea that somehow this has just appeared recently is incorrect. There's a long canon, and in fact, quite a well-established research record into more social value. Certainly, social entrepreneurship is a more recent thing, but a long history there. So that's great. Discover it if you don't know it. It's a good story. In terms of part of the question was really taking on from there, what's different now? What in our university or universities around the world can we do now that we couldn't do perhaps 10, 15 years ago? I think that's part of your question as well. And one thing from our university really is how we use resources, in particular how we use finance. So for instance, in the social enterprise space, what we couldn't have done 10 years ago and what we do now is if we see a social enterprise out there in the landscape, we'll buy it. As a university, we'll buy a social enterprise, or we'll buy part of it, or we'll set one up. using our own resources, which is an unusual. Not all universities do that. Certainly 10 years ago, 15 years ago, would have been quite difficult. It might have been illegal. It's not anymore, I don't think. Here comes the lawyers. So this notion of using your own cash to interact in the real world with social enterprises through financial vehicles, that's one thing which is different. I think the idea that also universities, certainly in the UK, have to raise money in very different ways from the US, because in the UK, this thing called philanthropy doesn't really exist, certainly not at the levels that you enjoy in the United States. So we don't have a whole army of rich benefactors to help out in these areas. We have to go and get money from elsewhere, and more and more that's from the money markets. Our university, we're going to be issuing a bond in the summer for about $150 million US dollars. We were just credit rated by Moody's, actually, last week. And the key thing they wanted to find out about was social enterprise. And when I said, well, look, we're part of the Ashoka group and we're a Changemaker campus, that went down really well. And that story was fantastic, very compelling. It helped that I think that perhaps the lady who was running it was an alum of one of the 22 universities in the Ashoka group. So that intervention may have saved us over 40 years several $1 million in interest rates. Now that's the real power of the Ashoka group. That wouldn't have happened 10 years ago, but it's happening now, and there'll be more of it.
I'm going to take a slightly different, probably more literal interpretation of your question. And in the context of business schools, I do think this is new. It's not necessarily very new for Babson, but I think for business schools in general, yes. Trying to bridge that gap between simply learning how to do business and imbuing that entire process with values and perhaps a mission, that's new. And you've seen it in companies where they've gone from sort of realizing that they should have some sort of corporate social responsibility and putting it over here in a bin. Like, here's my, here are the good things I'm doing. They're over here. Then I'm doing business as usual over here. Or to finally realizing that it needs to be integrated. And I think that for a long time, business schools have had that same approach. To certainly social entrepreneurship, but also teaching ethics and values, which is another thing that we really pride ourselves on at Babson, to try to integrate that discussion of values into every type of enterprise that we undertake. But I think that this is hard for business schools. I don't think that we should, in this room, because everyone thinks deeply about social entrepreneurship and creating social value here, I think we should all realize that there's a big challenge that still exists in much of academia, both in terms of bridging both the purely academic piece to the being active in your community piece, but also simply integrating all of these things coherently across everything that you teach. So this is a challenge that we hope that we meet every day, but I think that we need to begin to realize that when you start, for example, a social enterprise, you're looking at that enterprise from the standpoint of, I have a problem that I want to solve, and therefore I'm going to figure out how to create an enterprise to achieve that goal. And so your values are right there at the core of the initiation of that project, and so they're going to be throughout. But when you start a project because you see an opportunity in the economy that is not related necessarily to a social problem, but a place where you can hope to make a profit, you then have to have conditioned in yourself and in your education at business school the need to have an overlay of your values so that you can approach that same project still with an eye to social responsibility. And so it's balancing those two and not segmenting off the social entrepreneurship piece that I think is still going to be a challenge for business schools for a little while in the future, but we're seeing a lot of progress, I think, in thinking about this question.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. This is great. So we have a bit more of an understanding maybe of kind of what is old and what is new. There's a need to pay attention to the rapidly shifting dynamic of today's world. We need to think about new ways of kind of interacting across types of institutions. And if anything Nick mentioned was illegal, then I'll trust there's a lawyer in the audience who can tell us afterward. That's a joke. I don't think he's actually doing anything illegal. No? Okay. And then certainly the helpful business school
Can't see my hands.
Hopefully, and then also the business school perspective that, in fact, this idea that we can do something good and do something well at the same time, for most of us in the room is probably familiar, but is still novel in a lot of ways. So this is great. We're doing very well on time. And so for the last question, I have one more question for our panelists, and we'll kind of get them to go back and forth a little bit, have a bit of a conversation about it, and then we can take a few questions from all of you. So my question is, we're at the end of the exchange here, and I think a lot of us are wondering what's next. So we've had 3 days of inspiring talks, panels, workshops, discussions. We've heard about empathy, collaboration, social business, entrepreneurship, curriculum development. And I think a lot of us want to know, where is this all headed? Unfortunately, social entrepreneurship, as Darron said, is not a silver bullet. It's not going to magically just fix all of our problems, and it's not easy either. So I want to pause and think for a moment about today's world. Don't get depressed because we have some inspirational answers to this question, but the world that we live in today is one of inequality, gun-related violence, and more record-breaking temperatures, droughts, and natural disasters than in any age before us. Along with all of this, there seems to be a firm belief in technological solutionism. That is, many people think that the solutions to these problems are as simple as smartphones, hyper-efficient supply chains, and geoengineering. And so here's my question. What challenges and opportunities are your schools seeing in preparing students for lives of meaning in the world of tomorrow? What should we prioritize? Which aspects of higher education are essential, and which aspects are maybe a little bit outdated and need to be cast aside?
Right, well, I'll leap in. We were teasing him over dinner about how incredibly depressing that question was, but we also all have optimistic answers. So hold on just a second longer. So one of the things that we all have been encountering is a tension that is perhaps an age-old tension between the character of the academy, which is reflective. Traditionally, universities are places where people go to think, not to do, but to think. And so when you think about wanting to infuse your university or college with a desire to be involved with entrepreneurship or social entrepreneurship in particular, that is going to lead you outside the academy. That's going to lead you into the world. And any number of colleges and universities these days have as part of their mission statement that they are supposed to have a global impact, that they are supposed to engage with the world in a positive way and make a difference, to be change makers. And this is going to continue to create tension between the traditional job description, if you will, of a university versus what we ourselves are experiencing now in our universities as our students get very excited about the change that they can create globally and how they want to create that change. So some of the things that we're trying very hard to do is find ways for our students to engage in the world constructively, but also to be able to reflect on those experiences and to learn from those experiences and to give the experience from those real-world encounters back to academia or government or other places where they can be used.
Yeah, I think, Kerry, I absolutely agree with that. I think that, well, on in terms of the student learning outcomes, it's, how do we need to change students' focus away from being creative thinkers? We're very good at producing creative students who think well to creative problem solvers. Should that be all universities' missions in the future? Solving problems, forget the creativity piece. I'm sure a colleague to the right of me will have a view on that. In my university, maybe yes, maybe that's the way we want to drive a lot of the activity and the pedagogy over the next few years. I think a larger piece really relates, might be just UK specific, but I would be surprised if it were so. If you look around at the state of public finances in the civic society in general, they're in not good shape. And what role could universities play as anchors in communities in helping out or even beginning to run social services of various sorts in metropolitan areas or perhaps in rural areas? So one example, we saw the great work at TriLab here a few days ago, where it's a small intervention, some group of people working on an evidence-based research project with one department in the civic area. But why couldn't universities think bigger than that? You know, why can't we start to think about actually running services and perhaps doing it better than is presently done? Question mark. I mean, one area we've looked at that in the UK, in Northampton, is that we took over a failing arm of a hospital that was a podiatry clinic, and we bought it for real cash, about $1 million off the National Health Service, and we now run it as a social enterprise model. We charge people. It's about $10 to have your feet checked, but it's now starting to make money. It is profitable. That money is plowed back into the social enterprise. It supports students and it supports research, so it becomes self-sustaining. So I think there are interesting models out there for universities bold enough to want to take on this challenge.
Again, we go back to the dinner conversation a little bit, but we talked about the tension here between what you might call a hands-on approach to learning with the minds-on approach to learning, and there's that tension between the two. And I think we should agree that it's okay to have that tension. And at the College of the Atlantic, we were born in the late 60s to think about and fix problems, and that's okay. But I also want to make sure in this space of social entrepreneurship, we have the space for the contemplative, right, and the thoughtful, because we don't always have to be out there. If we see the world in terms of a bunch of problems, that starts from a really depressing point of view. And so, and neither do we need to be overly naive and Pollyannish and think the world's perfect. But certainly, I like the idea of balancing this kind of hands-on with minds-on approach to learning, and doing both and being iterative between those two. I think is what makes the strongest student and ultimately the strongest change maker.
I see Babson moving to some new models around being both hands-on and contemplative at the same time. So, for example, for the last few years, one of our professors has been working on a project in Manizales, Colombia, where he's been asked by the government to come in and work with the governor's office and the universities and the banking system and other social organizations there to create the ideal entrepreneurial ecosystem. And it was an experiment. This is a giant experiment. To this point, most experiments from universities have gone on in laboratories or inside the university. I think one of the things that we have the opportunity to do now as social entrepreneurs is to carry on those same kind of experiments, but in the world. And we have to be very careful because we're dealing with real people there, not things in laboratories. But what, in this particular case, we found was, yes, they could virtually double the amount of entrepreneurship going on in this community. And the World Bank suddenly identified it as the place where it's easiest to do business in all of Colombia, and it wasn't before. And we saw 1 billion new pesos invested in businesses there because of his work with lenders to encourage them to recognize the value of small and medium-sized entrepreneurial businesses. So there's now the opportunity to study that, to go back and look at that, not just to say, thank you very much, Manizales, goodbye, you're all straightened out, but to say, okay, this is a really interesting model to study. What can we learn from this? What can other cities learn from this? And so I think the idea of creating living laboratories is an interesting new one that we have to recognize as we all become more socially entrepreneurial. You're doing that. And
yeah, this recalls an idea that I think reimagining what is local is very, very important. We're always interested about bringing our entrepreneurial ideas to the globe, and that's important. We can never turn away from that. But at the College of the Atlantic, I'm trying to help us rethink about what's right in our front yard. And we are on the Gulf of Maine, and there are these 15 outer islands in the Gulf of Maine that are unbridged and have year-round communities on them. And they're faced with incredible challenges of food security and energy security, most importantly. These islands don't want to be laboratories, right? They have very, very real challenges as communities. Nevertheless, they want to be exposed to some interesting ideas. So what we've done at the College of the Atlantic is we've created a new way to imagine a course that is a collaboration between the college, between an organization called the Island Institute, and between island community members, where they come together to take a semester's worth of work looking at energy security. We're all going over to Samso, Denmark, which is a carbon neutral island, learn from that experience, come back to two islands called Matinicus and Monhegan in the Gulf of Maine, and really implement some of these ideas. It's a great opportunity for learning for our students, but it also helps us reimagine the way a typical classroom can really work, where we really completely eliminate the sage on the stage mentality, and we work on this really complex problem together between a college, a community development organization, and 15 island communities. Really, really exciting. And it shows that small can be beautiful also. We're always excited about scale, and that's really important to try and scale these things up, but we don't need to rush there always. Small can be absolutely gorgeous, and that's important. Small schools, very, very gorgeous. Right?
I mean, just over a year ago in the UK, there was a report published called An Avalanche is Coming by a guy called Sir Michael Barber, who was Tony Blair's advisor. And that warns of the sort of risks facing universities across the world, globalization, increased cost of tuition, shifting demographics, market forces, etc. And it sort of warned universities about three things: about being risk adverse, about being a bit timid in how they deal with real world problems, and being complacent. And the avalanche metaphor is that those universities who carry on with those behaviors in the future will be swept away, and I think that's quite powerful. And so we've taken that on board at our university, and we've tried our best to not be risk-averse, not be complacent, and not be timid. And the social enterprise, social entrepreneurship, Changemaker agenda is actually quite a key part in guiding our thinking in the direction away from the avalanche, so at least we can sort of ski down on top of it without being buried. I think that's to use the sort of metaphor.
The disaster metaphor.
The disaster metaphor, yeah.
Exactly.
Back to doom and gloom.
So,
I think one reason that the academy can be kind of entrenched are our departments. And one way that the College of the Atlantic has avoided that is we are a departmentless university, departmentless college. Now, is that model applicable across all colleges and universities? That's a tough question. But I think it does give us a stance that is particularly nimble, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we need to be nimble. If there's ever a time to be nimble, it's now.
I think that I'm very attracted by it. I mean, that the faculty-less school is really appealing.
Or department.
great. I'm sure that appeals to all of you, right?
Why stop at departments? I mean, when you're a student applying to university, certainly in the UK, you don't apply to a faculty, you apply to a course, right? So the faculty structures are just internal constructs, generally just to help people get promoted, as far as I can tell. So, do we really need them? Do we really
I
need
think
them?
they're filming
Question.
this. Did you?
Who said that? He told me to say it. No, seriously, if you think about a university moving forward, 10, 15, 20 years in the future, perhaps sooner, it should all be up for grabs. If Changemaker is about anything, it's about thinking radically. And if all of a sudden you can't think about a faculty-less university, then I would suggest you're not a Changemaker university.
Thank you.
So there.
Yeah, and Nick and I actually talked about this when we were getting ready for the panel, and this idea that, yes, there's going to be changes in kind of the structure of universities, but at the same time, of course, it's not about eliminating faculty, but it's about thinking about really what is the value of faculty and what is the value of a campus, and how can we restructure the system so that it's more perfectly centered on that value rather than around a structure. So I think this has been really helpful because when I kept asking them this question, what do our priorities need to be? What should our priorities be? And I just wanted a clear answer, like tell me what we can keep and tell me what we can get rid of. And it's not super straightforward. And what we can see is that it really depends on your context, right? The size of the school, the location of the school, the educational philosophy of the school. But at the same time, there's some pretty clear trends. We need to move away from insular learning. We need to move away from department-based learning, and we need to move away from the kind of sage on the stage mentality. We need to emphasize hands-on research and teaching. We need to emphasize creative problem solving, and we need to emphasize creative engagement with our communities. So I hope this has been helpful so far, and what I want to do now is take a couple questions from all of you. You can frame your question either to the whole panel or to one of our panelists specifically. Just raise your hand, anyone? Great, I guess we covered it all. So you can all go, oh, no, there's a question, okay. So, yes.
How you doing? First of all, thank you for doing this panel. It was awesome. My name is Chris from the University of Maryland, and throughout this whole exchange, there seems to be some kind of disconnect. Well, I've observed some kind of disconnect between the term social entrepreneurship and more inclusive terms such as changemaker, change-making. And it seems as though the people who are from the business aspect really gravitate towards this term entrepreneurship. We get what it means, you add the social in front of it, yay, we're gonna do good things involving business. But from a different aspect, when you take somebody who might be in biology, might be in engineering or something like that, it seems to be it can be kind of daunting. So I was wondering, how do you kind of embed that in the way you approach the student outreach or way you strategize the curriculum to really come from a place of inclusion and kind of bring everybody in?
I think that's one for me, at least initially anyway. For those of you who don't know, Babson as a college is known for our focus on entrepreneurship. And this is a question that we've struggled with as that focus developed. The question became, are we only about one of our departments? Are we only about our Department of Entrepreneurship? Or how does the concept of entrepreneurship apply more broadly? And eventually, the faculty evolved this notion of entrepreneurial thought and action, and they call it ETA. That we have acronyms for everything at Babson. I don't know why, but it's just one of those horrible things for a new person to have to come in. People can speak entirely in code, and you never know what they're talking about. But ETA is entrepreneurial thought and action. And to some degree, that concept answers your question precisely, because what we teach now at Babson is not how to start a business, but a way of thinking entrepreneurially. So you can be a scientist, you can be within an organization, you could be in government, you could be in any position, but you will have been taught to do certain things, and one of those things is how to fail, but also to learn from that failure and pivot and take another course, and not to be discouraged by that, but to view that as a learning experience. There's a number of things that are all part of this discipline of entrepreneurial thought and action, which can actually be applied anywhere. So I perhaps should have mentioned that earlier, but it's one of those things that we believe solves that issue of the notion of entrepreneurship being a narrow field.
Go ahead.
I think for us, being a Changemaker campus doesn't mean that absolutely everybody has to be involved in being a Changemaker. I mean, they're two sort of separate things. So our sort of laissez-faire approach would be that it's there. If you want it, kind of come and get it, we'll help you, and all the rest of it will support you. If you don't, and let's face it, it won't be for everybody, that's fine as well.
Yeah, earlier we were talking in that the Babson experience was it was entrepreneurship, and at some point the word social was added to the phrase, and there was a little it took a little.
Social and economic value. That
Okay,
it was
yeah.
we were going to create social and economic value.
That's right.
Yeah.
And at the College of the Atlantic, it wasn't the social that was the problem, it was the word entrepreneurship that was the problem. Because especially in the 70s, in the college's infancy, the private sector was the enemy, and it took some time to really adapt to the idea that the private sector, there's real power there and power for change. So we decided we'd come up with the term anti-social entrepreneurship, right?
Thanks. Can we take another question? Do we have? Yeah. Okay. Over there. We have right there in the plaid. Yeah.
So just in the last just few sessions, and I guess just throughout the whole conference, and I mean, I want to say thank you to you all, to the panel. I really liked a lot of your responses, but kind of my issue a lot of the times with, just talking about social entrepreneurship is that we're, looking how to promote change and looking how to, build better social systems, but we're not kind of willing to reflect within our own social system and kind of disrupt those changes and make those changes from within. And so how can we promote that change externally if we're not willing to do it internally? And I was wondering if you guys believe that we can, do all this social change and make, lead kind of to more of a positive social future without disrupting some of the social, some of the more wrong, I guess, social infrastructure that's already in place. Does that kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. One of the new projects that we have at Babson is a project that's focusing on new cities. And the world is growing very rapidly right now, and people want to gravitate towards cities, but our existing cities won't be able to accommodate all the people who are going to need to live in urban areas moving forward. And so hundreds of new cities are going to be built around the world during the course of your lifetimes. And so one of the things that we want to start looking at is how are those greenfield sites going to be constructed, and are they opportunities for universities to engage in helping to mold those societies and to create perhaps better structures than the ones that we've seen in the past. Babson in particular, of course, is interested in the economic structure. How do you create structures in these new cities that will attract investment and be amenable to entrepreneurship and encouraging entrepreneurship? And it's our hope that part of this process will be that you will have examples, positive examples, that can lead others to saying, oh, this structure works, this economic approach works, and that they can be positive models for change. So maybe that's not the kind of disruption that you had in mind, but there are ways to lead governments and people in a new direction by showing success, and hopefully some of these new cities will be laboratories for success.
I think maybe another way to imagine disruption is through changing your internal institution, and I'm not sure if when you were using the word internal if you meant institutionally, but I think change comes from individuals, but it also comes from individuals working as part of an institution. And so one of the things we really like to do at the College of the Atlantic is to ask students to be change makers of the college itself. There's no better place to start disrupting an institution than the college that you're a part of. So I think that's a great opportunity for people to start to tinker with these institutions, because ultimately I see institutions as being some of the most powerful change makers out there.
Okay. Yeah, we have one more question here. Thanks. Here, hold on just a moment. We have a mic coming right there. Yeah, thanks. Thanks.
I'm Prakash Bista. I'm all the way from Nepal. I'm a freshman at Ashoka University of America in California. Actually, I was really intrigued by one of the concept shared by President of College of Atlantic, the concept about globalization and localization. The college need to be more focused in their localities, not saying that. But I felt really afraid because of that, because if we would be thinking like that, I would not be here. If colleges would be thinking about, like the colleges here, thinking about only the communities here, I would not be here. And my another like concept for the universities in the US right now is not only to accept international students and give them a scholarship. What I've been seeing back in Nepal is like a lot of students in Nepal get scholarship to study in the US. But the challenges we are facing back home, I'm from one of the very remote part of Nepal. What we have been facing is like people from very remote part of Nepal, if they get educated, they do not come back. And the part is like being more and more backward. And the people in cities who get scholarship, and they are already rich because they have studied in very good schools, they have spent a lot of money, and only they have access to education in the US, and they usually do not go back. So my question is like, for the colleges in the US, it's not only to focus in local things, rather than to go to even the extreme villages in the world where they don't have the presence right now to make the real sense happen. Thank you.
So that's a great question. And I think when I think about the College of the Atlantic context, when I was talking about the local, I'm not necessarily interested in everyone coming to COA, studying local, and then staying on Mount Desert Island to help deal with or wrestle with some of these problems, but more making sure we use the local context as best we can as a learning opportunity to then go off and go work wherever these problems emerge. And I think at COA we have this amazing student who is in so many respects an epitome of a changemaker student. His name's Surya Karki. He's from Nepal. And he came specifically to the College of the Atlantic to get some local experience so that he could go back and create a system of free schools in the countryside in Nepal. So again, it's just reimagining the power of the local. It doesn't necessarily mean, I don't think, that we're asking people to come and stay and focus there. I mean, the whole point is to come, learn what we can here, and go back. And even in a school like ours of 350 students, we have 20% of the student body that's international from 35 different countries. And it's an amazing opportunity to come to MDI, to Mount Desert Island, where the college is. But more importantly, we want them to come have extraordinary opportunities and extraordinary experiences, but then return. And that's a really important and critical piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I would agree. At Babson, we're very blessed. We have students from over 70 countries. I think in some years it's 80 countries. And I know, because I'm fortunate enough to go visit them, that our alumni are now spread all over the world. So we have hundreds of alumni, concentrated in cities around the world. So we focus on being an international college. We've just established new scholarships for international students who would not otherwise have the means to attend. This has been a problem, not only at our college, but at many colleges in the US, that there aren't enough scholarships for international students. And I think that as we start to bring some young people who are for international students to our colleges who are deeply committed to the future of their country, that you will see more people go back and do the sorts of things that you're concerned about. But I know that most of our international students, in fact, do go back to the countries from which they came, and then they're actively involved in both business there and government and social enterprise. Thank you.
Well, thanks again to all of our panelists and to all of you. I think this has definitely given us a really good sense of how the perspective looks across a couple different schools. We've talked about social entrepreneurship across the entire campus, or change making across the entire campus. We talked about what is old and kind of reinvigorated, and what is new and different. And we've also hopefully gotten a bit of insight as to what should be next. So I want to thank everyone again. I think that if there's an answer to that question that I asked about, where are we going and how can we solve all this, then the answer probably comes through this kind of exchange of ideas, exchange of perspectives, et cetera. So thanks to all of you, and thank you again to our panelists.
The deluge of bad things that's going to happen.
Thanks, Kerry. Yeah, we didn't even need the arena.
I thought about breaking it out.
Need the energy drink. It seems to go okay. You've done lots of these, so you'll get a sense, I'm sure.
Yes, but I haven't done a lot around. I haven't spoken that much about Babson, right? So I'm still learning.
Hello, we are not quite done, but we are almost there.
That's right, yeah.
It wasn't too long ago in American history when the idea of universal literacy was a new idea. And I'll leave you tonight with one thought of what would it be like if universal change-making was no longer a new idea, and the skills of teamwork, leadership, and empathy were something that all of us was imbued in our education as much as something like literacy or math. Ashoka U's goals are to ensure that social entrepreneurship is a rich part of everyone's education, and that we move from anecdote to analysis and rigorous analysis to understand what works, what doesn't work, and why. We also are seeking to help faculty and students bridge theory and practice by engaging with Ashoka's network. At Ashoka, we have more than 30 years of experience to show that innovation comes at the intersections, and social entrepreneurship and universities creating a space for social entrepreneurship should allow for those intersections to happen. As we see tonight the designation of 2 new Changemaker campuses, we see not only our campus teams growing in terms of crossing disciplinary boundaries, but also the network becoming increasingly global, which is exactly what we need to solve global problems. We're honored by the increased participation and commitment to this community from outside the US. And I'll now turn the podium over to Michele Leaman to introduce and welcome those Changemaker campuses to our network.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be up here, and a very special favorite moment for me, because I get to announce 2 new Changemaker campuses, and we've been on, me and these Changemaker campuses and the whole Ashoka U team, we've been on a long journey together. Changemaker campuses is a designation for colleges and universities that have embedded social entrepreneurship, and that are seeking new ways to build and strengthen ecosystems for change-making across campus. And this journey that we've been on is quite rigorous. It involves a scan of all the activities already going on campus. It involves interviews. It involves a site visit, and finally a selection panel. And my favorite part of this is that this selection process is closely modeled after the Ashoka's fellow selection process. And just like every Ashoka fellow has a new idea, every Changemaker campus brings a unique contribution to this network, a unique way of seeing their role in social change and social impact. And one story from one of the universities being selected as a Changemaker campus tonight. Actually, I've been carrying this moment with me for this entire year about why this work matters so much to me. And it was at a site visit at Universidad de Monterrey when we sat down and kind of just debriefed after the site visit about what this process has been like. And it's very, very unfortunate, but I don't speak Spanish. And so there were some language barriers and incredible generosity to translate for me every step of the way. And you know, sometimes language barriers are a barrier. But I find also that sometimes there's a unique nuance that comes out that you wouldn't have gotten from a native speaker. And so one member of the change team says in response to what this process has been like for them, she says something about, this process has given me spine, and I'm not quite getting it yet. And we work on it a little bit, and finally we get to it, and she says, this process has given me a backbone to demand more from my colleagues in my institution. And that made me incredibly happy. And I think that's what we all do for each other here. Strengthen each other to ask more from our institutions and from our colleagues to help develop change makers. And so it is now my great honor to ask up, and I will read a short description from each of the Changemaker campuses. And if you could wait for applause until after I finish reading the descriptions. So accepting the award on behalf of Ryerson University is Amanda Gaspard, Director of Research and Communications. And if you can come on up here, and I'll read a little bit about Ryerson University. Located in downtown Toronto, Ontario, Ryerson University is an institution located in the most diverse city in the world. With a strong reputation for scrappy innovation, Ryerson is facing head-on the role of higher education in supporting urban communities and new Canadians. Ryerson University is also a pioneer in zone education, a learning model environment focused on collaboration. For example, the Digital Media Zone, a 5-story incubator space on the busiest intersection of downtown Toronto, offers open office space, coaching, and unparalleled networking and media exposure to budding entrepreneurs. The space is shared with retail, business, and a movie theater, which doubles as classroom space during the day. 35% of the Digital Media Zone ventures are social in nature, which has motivated Ryerson University to envision and soon launch a dedicated social innovation zone. We would like to welcome Ryerson University as the first Canadian Changemaker campus. Congratulations. Accepting the award on behalf of Universidad de Monterrey is Isabella Grutter, and Vice President of Student Affairs, and Carlos Basurto, Dean of School of Business. Universidad de Monterrey was founded by 5 different religious congregations to promote the holistic development of students who learn to serve the community. They are committed to educating the whole student to live a meaningful life of social change. But Universidad de Monterrey's commitment reaches far beyond campus. UDEM's initiatives, Universidad de Barrios, brings higher education into the neighborhoods to support community leaders to implement social projects and develop agents of change for their own community. And what initially began as a single elective social entrepreneurship class at the Universidad de Monterrey soon became a required course for the entire business school, reaching roughly 25% of all UDEM students. Now, UDEM wants to take it even one step further. A university proposal was accepted for modules from this social entrepreneurship course to be embedded into courses that are part of UDEM's general education requirements. This means that by 2015, 100% of the student population will be exposed to social entrepreneurship before they graduate. Join me in congratulating Universidad de Monterrey. Thank you, and I'd now like to ask Marina Kim to close us out, Executive Director of Ashoka U.
Okay, we are in the home stretch, just a few final minutes. And so just the last few honors I get to do is actually start with a massive thank you, first of all, to all of you for being such wonderful, engaged, collaborative, community-oriented participants, and just the energy. Everyone has been commenting on the warmth and the energy everywhere, and all of that is really due to you. So every conversation you have, every time you ask someone you see looking confused in the hallway, how can I help? Do you know where to go? All of that really contributes to this ethos, this philosophy, this community we really hope to see much more of in the world. So thank you. But also, of course, bringing together the exchange and this wonderful exchange community takes a lot of work from a lot of people and a lot of support from a lot of people. So I'd like to just make an extra special thank you to a few people who made all of this possible. So first of all, to our wonderful, incredible partners and hosts at Brown University, I'd like to make a specific thank you to President Paxson, who not only spoke on the panel and offered us wonderful insights about some of her vision for Brown University, but also hosted all day today a President's Track. We've brought together nearly 20 presidents, provosts, and trustees from a network of campuses and to share this vision for what's possible at the university level, at the senior-most level. In addition, the incredible Swearer Center team, and you've seen many of them talk about what they do and some of the innovations they've created at Brown. So Roger Nozaki, Lizzie Pollock, Alan Harlem, just a few of the many people who make all of the social innovation at Brown thrive. In addition, many of our other key partners and sponsors include Photo Wings, Western Union, Indiegogo, the Cordis Foundation. In addition to that, many other key partners, including some of our Changemaker campuses, Babson College, Marquette University, Duke University, Middlebury College, Ask Big Questions, Indiegogo, Brigham Young University, the University of Northampton, Tecnológico de Monterrey, Campus Guadalajara, and really a huge array of other special partners that the list goes on and on. So I won't mention everybody, but I thank everybody. We also are about to announce, a very special announcement, some of you, that actually the next year, Exchange 2015 will be hosted at the University of Maryland. So get excited. We have a great contingent here this year from Maryland, and they're looking forward to welcoming all of you to College Park and the Washington, D.C. area next year. So mark it in your calendars, February 2015. We'll send you more information as we get clearer on the exact dates.